The Triton Regional School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, and the provisions herein as extended by an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations, which was signed into law on July 16th, 2022. These provisions suspend the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. I hereby call to order this meeting of the District Communication Committee on February 20th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. I am Linda Lukowski, Chair of the School Committee. I know introductions are tougher on Zoom rather than around the table like we usually do. So I'm going to call out names, and if you could let me know if you can hear me and give your position, that would be great. Brian Forget.
I'm giving my name and my position, right? You gave the name. Brian Forget, Superintendent for Triton.
Kyle.
Kyle here, Director of Finance and Operations with Triton.
Aaron.
Aaron Berger, School Committee.
Jeff. Jeff.
How's that better? Select
No.
person. No?
No, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Select person Newbury, sorry.
Michael Colburn.
Salisbury Selectman Michael Colburn.
Matthew Landers.
Matt Landers, School Committee.
Leslie.
Leslie Matthews, Select Board Newbury.
Caitlin.
Caitlin Hunter, School Committee.
Paul Goldner.
Paul Goldner, School Committee.
Narissa.
Narissa Wallen, School Committee.
Paul Mayette.
Paul Mayette, School Committee, Newbury.
Neil.
Neil Harrington, Town Manager, Salisbury.
Paul Lees.
School Committee, Triton, Raleigh.
Peter. Peter, can you hear me? Okay. For this meeting, the District Communication Committee is convening remotely. Oh, we have Christine too. Sorry, Christine.
Christine Neal and Raleigh Board of Selectmen.
Linda, I was going to say, I see Patrick Heffernan, who is Newbury Finance Committee, and
Susanna
is here.
And Richard Keys, Newbury Finance. Yes.
Donna Abdella.
And Chuck Takesian is here.
Okay.
Chuck
Donna?
Takesian, Salisbury Board of Selectmen.
Yep. Donna.
Donna Abdella, Salisbury Board of Selectmen.
Susanna.
Susanna Copeland, School Committee, Raleigh.
Patrick.
Patrick Heffernan in the Finance Committee in Newbury.
Yeah, I think that's everyone. For this meeting, the District Communication Committee is convening remotely via Zoom using the information posted on the district's website identifying how the public may join. If you are personally attending by video conference using your device's camera, please be aware that others may be able to see you. Committee members and administrators, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the district website with the agenda posting unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I'm sorry about the late notice and about scheduling and the timing during school vacation week, but I became aware last week of new information from our member towns. I wanted to provide a public forum to voice that since anything that affects the district affects all 3 member towns. The The school committee also has scheduled a virtual meeting on Thursday night to discuss tonight's conversation. We've changed the public hearing that was supposed to be February 28th to March 6th. And we will be using the evening of February 28th to have additional discussions. We may not need all these dates and could change the schedule again, but for now, I wanted to plan for as much discussion time as possible before the public hearing on March 6th and the final budget vote on March 13th. We have the notes from the February 8th meeting. No formal vote is needed. These are notes and not official minutes, but does anyone have any comments or clarifications on those notes? Seeing none, we'll go right into the FY25 budget. As of last DCC meeting, we received a letter from Raleigh about the budget and had some follow-up discussions. Based on those discussions, the school committee opted to vote the tentative budget at the green box scenario 1 amount on February 13th. Since then, the superintendent and I have received a letter from the Newbury Select Board Chair on behalf of the Newbury Select Board, and the superintendent received an email from the Salisbury Town Manager on behalf of the town of Salisbury. Those letters are attached, and I'd like to start by welcoming any more comments from the towns that they would like to share about their letters.
Well, let me just say on behalf of the town of Salisbury, the board did not have a chance to meet formally and discuss this matter or take a vote, but I had phone conversations and emails with all of the members of the board. And the email that I sent to the superintendent this morning represents the board's position. Individual board members from Salisbury, of course, can speak for themselves, but our email represents the town's position at this point.
Thank you, Neil. And I just want to say that this DCC meeting is part of our regional agreement, and this is where we have the discussions about the towns and the schools and what's needed. And I think the school has been pretty straightforward and upfront as to the needs of the school. So with Raleigh and Newbury coming in, giving us letters, it'd be nice to hear from one of those two towns as to what their position is on it.
Hi, Linda. Can you hear me? It's Chris Nealand.
Yes, I can, Chris.
Okay, so I just want to reiterate that on behalf of the Raleigh Board of Selectmen, we are still hoping for scenario number 3. That is going to be a stretch for our community, but that's where we stand at this point, is scenario number 3.
Thank you, Chris.
Linda, can you hear me?
Is that Jeff? Yes.
It is, sorry. For some reason, I don't seem to be getting through, but on this, for Newbury, I would like to reiterate also that we held a formal meeting of the select board, and it was our outcome that we have voted to recommend scenario 3 also.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what scenario 3 entails. Box scenario 1 was 900 and
66
yeah,
million.
60 some odd million that we've already cut out of the budget. Going to scenario number 3 is another 400 and some odd $1,000 that'll have to be cut from the school.
Linda, I have a question.
Certainly, Paul.
So if 2 of the towns are talking about option 3, then if I understand it correctly, Brian's going to come back to us on Thursday and tell us what that means to our
Yes.
staffing and our programs, et cetera. Okay, I hope the towns could jump in on the meeting on Thursday and just get a better understanding.
Sorry, can I ask Brian to clarify that? Because I'm not sure that that was the case in the way that we planned out the meetings when Brian, Linda, and I sat down.
So, sorry, I was joking as I was trying to unmute. So just to clarify timing, the committee, obviously this is a much larger body, helpful information that guides the committee in giving us guidance as far as what the target is. We're going to have another discussion with the committee on Thursday to decide on what that target number is. If 2 of 3 towns are holding firm to scenario 3, then I don't want to make assumptions, but if that were the guidance on Thursday, we would come back next week with details about specifically what those cuts are. And just to say that with this full group, we are long ago in a land far away. Some of you will remember this. I remember making cut scenarios of $2 million, $1.5 million, $1 million, and we were saving money here. We were trimming money off of supplies. We were trimming money off of materials. All of that is gone. So with the 966,000 in paring back and reductions that we made into the tentative budget, some of that is right sizing that. Some of that is trimming any possible capacity we had. So from here forward, it's positions. And so rather than coming up with a list of positions and starting to speak out people's names, it's easy when we're talking about a section at the high school and not talking specifics. But as soon as we start putting out nebulous positions without name or without exact detail, everyone assumes that they're next. So we're trying to manage this from an employer perspective so that we don't create undue or unnecessary hysteria. So, but just to confirm, Paul, the plan is that was the purpose of the second meeting this week for the school committee, is for the school committee to separately process all of your thoughts, the 9 of you to process your thoughts about what you want to do as far as next steps. And then next week, it is Wednesday, the 28th, I believe, I would come back to you with a list of reductions to get to whatever target we're talking about. And then there'll be a public hearing the following week in which we will have shared both the tentative budget as well as the proposed reductions, additional reductions on the table ahead of time for those people showing up.
Is there anybody else from our towns that would like to say anything else? Mike? Go ahead, Mike.
So after the Thursday meeting, are we gonna have another DCC meeting before the public meeting, Brian or Linda?
I don't think we're gonna have enough time to do that.
Cause I
So-
just think you don't know, everyone knows my position, so I think the public's gotta know what's going on here. And I think we're gonna have to do everything we can to get the information out correctly.
Yes.
And we all gonna have to live with our decision on this one.
Well, what I would like to propose tonight, that if in the event of scenario 3, that possibly we could come and make a presentation to each of the select boards.
Yep, I just want to make sure the information's out correctly. And
Once we know what those cuts are.
when we know what the cuts are, I think the people need to know, because we're all gonna have to answer for this one to the parents. That's all.
Absolutely.
Linda, I'm not sure if you can see, but you've got a chat from Peter and a hand from Paul Mayette.
I'm sorry, I don't see it.
Okay.
I can
hang
see
on.
the chat. I was gonna say, if you want to let Paul ask a question, I'll be able to.
Certainly, Paul. I mean, anybody from the school committee can absolutely speak. So go right ahead.
Well,
Maya.
So I would say this would be more specifically at Newbury and Rowley right now, but I haven't heard anything close to the type of justification I would need to hear to support cuts of the type you're asking for. So I'm going to be very frank as to how I view this right now, and I'm going to ask you to do the same, because I don't think it needs to be more of a dialogue rather than just sort of coming in and saying this is a recommendation. When we start talking about budgets that are difficult, we're talking about values. It demonstrates specifically what we value. What we hold on to is what we are placing an emphasis on. My personal values, the type of society I want to live in, the type of community I want to be part of, is one where we're willing to make sacrifices for the next generation. We're willing to hand things on to make it better for those who come next, even when that is difficult, especially when that is difficult. It would be my preference to stay with the top scenario that we've got right now and ask the towns for an override, and then lead, go out into the community, explain the necessity of it, explain what will happen to the schools if we don't do that. We could say that that's not, a popular notion, but honestly, if we're going to just go for what we feel is a popular notion, anybody could be sitting in our seats. That it's about taking some time and getting out there and being leaders. If we're not going to do that, then that tells me that we are prioritizing, when we get back to that question of values, we are prioritizing lower taxes over the needs of the students. That's really the only way I can put it. It's nobody's fault. It's a difficult tax. It's a difficult financial time for the school. It's a difficult financial time for the town. There is going to be pain that is going to have to be carried. My personal value system would be that we ask the people of the town to make a small sacrifice for the students rather than have the students bear that pain. If you value those taxes more, I need to hear why. I need to hear some sort of moral justification for that, because I don't have it. I just don't right now. I can't go there.
Do you want to go on to Peter's question?
Yes.
I don't want to lose that before we.
So Peter's question was, the Raleigh Finance Committee was talking about the concept of living within Prop 2.5 and what that would mean. So I'm not sure the exact question, but so if we were to get to within a 2.5% increase on the budget, that would be an additional from the tentative budget. It's roughly $232,000 to get to scenario 2. It's roughly $482,000 to get to scenario 3. To get to a 2.5% increase on our operating, it would be $1.372 million. So that would be a 2.5% increase on the current year budget at $49,461,210.
Brian, can you hear me now?
There you are, Larry. Yes, I was just going to say, Larry was messaging, trying to unmute. We got you.
Okay, you'll regret that. I have some questions on the budget.
Okay.
How many of the students have opted out of, how many of the special ed students have opted out of Triton versus those that have opted in?
How many students, special ed students? So opted, so we have the option of school choice, right? So students families can choose to bring their students to Triton, students who live in Newbury, Raleigh, Salisbury.
Right. I'm trying to get an idea of if we have reduced class sizes and stuff like that, is that contributing to students opting out or no effect or whatever type of a thing?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. So, I mean, there's students who are receiving special education services who are in a classroom setting and receiving specialized services. There are students who are in, it's called a substantially separate program because their needs are so great, there wouldn't be in the general classroom. And then there are those whose needs are so great that we can't educate them within our schools. And the team, not Brian, not Kyle, not Shannon Nolan, not the school committee, not the principal, the team, the IEP team with the family, the educators, the specialists, make a decision when we aren't able to meet the needs of that student, and then they're tuitioned out. So I don't know that that answers your question. I'm not exactly sure what the question.
Well, you're basically saying that irregardless of the class size, be it 15 or 26, doesn't make a difference on students opting in or opting out.
Larry, I don't think any of us understand the question that you're asking. I know that we had a conversation last week where Ronna Lee explained to you what happens when we underfund schools and where we make classroom sizes bigger in her experience with losing students for not being able to provide services and then having to put them in outplacement. And that's, I think, something that you're trying to pull into this conversation that we just can't predict. We don't have a crystal ball to be able to predict exactly who we aren't going to be able to provide services to and give you a flat number for that. But Ronnie,
No, I'm not asking for a prediction. I'm asking for the year that we are in.
How many people are in outplacement?
How many students have opted out and what particular grades? I'm trying to establish, is there a trend that we're not looking at?
Like school choice, do you mean? Or what do you mean opting out?
Well, yes, school choice. I mean, we'll say, I don't know if the students, the special education students are looking for more one-on-one versus less. I'm trying to get to the problem of why do we need so many special ed students?
So
it goes down to individualized plans for being able to figure out how many staff we need per student. So it's not something that's easily calculated out like that.
Yeah,
And
I don't have data to show this, but I don't believe IEPs are a major contributor to the school choice, right? So we have 119 families, 119 students who were choiced out of the district and attending other Massachusetts schools. There may be students who are on an IEP whose families make that choice, but no one has needs that are so great that a family's choosing to go to another district. That's done through a tuition-based out-of-district arrangement. I think there's a lot of reasons that contribute to a family's decision. I actually shared a letter, draft letter to go to those 119 students. It's less families, is sometimes multiple students per family. That will be going out to all those families to ask those questions about why do they or why did they choice their student out. A lot of those families have been routinely choiced. There are some new this year. So we are doing the work to find out the answer to that question of what's driving those decisions to have students choice out. But I don't think there's a direct correlation with special education necessarily as you're hoping for it to be.
I'm not hoping. I'm looking for solutions to our problem.
Yes,
I'm not trying to force a solution. I'm trying to see where the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you. it partially answers my question. I'll move on from there. I don't want to spend too much time on it. On your page 3 of your budget, where you talk about the reduction in the classroom teachers, and the actual reduction may shift as course selections for next year are financed. That almost implies that if the need is there, that these reductions will be not will be put back in the budget. Is that a correct statement?
No. So we're confident that we can reduce 2 classroom teachers right now on paper. It's looking like within the history department and within the business math department. That could shift, right, as course enrollments are all finalized. And how do I describe this? So a teacher teaches 5 full sections. Sometimes we have teachers, we could reduce a 1.0 teacher by removing a section from 5 different departments. So right now it looks like a full teacher out of the social studies department and out of the math/business instruction department. Those could shift. The same 2.0 FTE is assumed there, but it could be half 3 sections out of math, 2 sections out of science. That all has to do with the science of a high school schedule, which is a beast. But no, there wouldn't be an addition back of those 2 teachers. There would be 2 teachers that are reduced.
Okay, thank you. On page 7 and 8, I'm looking at, we'll say, the Newberry has 617 students, and they have 42.8 special ed teachers and special ed instructional assistants, versus Rowley that comes up with a percentage of students to special ed personnel of 26.2 and Salisbury of 43.96. Now, I know that some students require full-time 100% special ed assistance, or at least I assume that. But it just seems, is that a...
So the question would be that Newberry seems disproportionately high?
Newberry seems proportionately low. They're 14.41. Salisbury seems proportionately high at 43.96.
So the staffing that you're pulling
is special ed teachers and instructional assistant special ed.
Yep. So it's the numbers, we've got to pull apart the numbers on page 7, because that isn't just students attending our school. That is all students that each of the 3 towns. So if there are 10 students living in Newbury and choicing into Newburyport, those 10 students are in the 617. They're not attending our schools. So those numbers don't correlate well as compared to page 8, which is the number of kids in our schools. Page 7 is the kids you're responsible for it's your foundation enrollment. Page 8 is the kids sitting in our classrooms.
Okay, on page 8, those numbers, and let's look at Pine Grove for the 2024-2025 classes.
Yep.
They don't match up with what your projections are as far as grade 1 you have as 3, should be 4. Grade 2 is you have as 4, it should be 2. I don't know if that's
So if you're looking at Pine Grove, right? So pre-K,
yes,
we show as 41, right? Preschool is a different beast, half days,
Right.
a few days a week. So the kindergarten, that's 61 for the 23-24 year. There's 3 sections, 20, 20, and 21.
right.
Those become grade 1 for next year. So if you look grade 1, 24, 25, there's 61, 3 sections, 20, 20, 21. The 64 students in grade 1 this year, 4 sections of 16, become 4 sections of 16 for grade 2 next year.
I think you're reading the columns wrong. I think you need to read the students and then the number of classes to the right of it, not to the left.
Well, I guess what I'm doing is also looking at the number of teachers that are assigned to that.
Well, if you look at grade, you were saying grade 2, right?
Yeah.
64 students, 4 classes, 16, 16, 16, 16. So 4 16s. And then if you look at grade 3, 72 students, 4 classes. Grade 4 is 43 students, 2 classes at 21 and 22. I think you're mixing up the columns.
Could very well be. But I think I'm going by if you go to page 28, you're looking at, we'll say for grade 2, or no, we'll say stick with grade 1. They list 4 teachers there. And yet you're saying we only have 3 classes?
So
Larry,
that,
I'm not.
I was gonna say, so that roster, the grade levels may not have been updated. So if you're looking, you said page 28, Larry?
Yes, page 28 shows 4 regular ed grade 1 teachers.
Yep.
That's exactly what Brian shared. So when I updated that FTE chart, I updated it for the 12 positions that are being cut as a part of this job, peeling those off. But to your point, Larry, if there was a reassignment of a grade 3 teacher to grade 4, I forgot to update that on that FTE chart. It would just be simply a shift from grade 3 to grade 4, not an addition of a position or a subtraction in that particular case.
Right. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to find fault. I'm trying to understand your budget. That's all.
That's fair.
It does feel like you're trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat, though, and the hat's empty. There is no rabbit to be found at this point. It really is a very stark choice. We make the decision to fund the needs, or we make damaging cuts. Kyle and Brian have put immense work into this, and if there was a stone that was left unturned, they'd have found it.
I agree with you, and they've done a fantastic job. And again, it's not, I'm trying to find fault with their budget or anything. I'm trying to understand the budget. That's all.
So Larry, just to clarify, to match the numbers, I appreciate your attention to the numbers. If you take the, even if you look at kindergarten on page 28, that shows 4 sections, says kindergarten professional, almost dead center of the page, 4.0. If you take those 4.0 and the 16 or 18 teachers up above, not including art, music, and PE, you get that same 22. They're just miscategorized, like Kyle noted. He just didn't update the grade level.
Okay, that's fine. Again, I'm looking to understand your budget because I have to explain your budget to Rowley.
Yep, that's fair.
And Larry, that's what this DCC meeting is for the towns to ask questions of our budget. So there is no issue with you asking as many questions as you want.
And
because
they're
that's-
also welcome to come. They can come too.
Right. Most of the questions that I receive are people that watch it from home and have differences with the school committee, but that's a different problem. On page 40, and this might sound stupid, but I'll throw it out there anyway. Could you define the homeless students? What exactly do you mean by homeless students?
So it is a Massachusetts designation. And when a student doesn't have a permanent residence, and I'll leave it as simple as that, there's a lot of varying nuances. A student who's in DCF custody or care, being placed with a family out of their resident home. When a student is deemed homeless, we do the process of deeming them following state guidelines. When a student is deemed homeless, students, they have a right to attend their school of origin and split the cost with the sending district. So we have a family who lives in the town of Rowley. They lose their home through financial reasons or what have you. They're then living with a family member in Danvers, Massachusetts. Because those students are now considered homeless, the student has a right to shift. The family has a right to decide whether to continue sending them to, say, their elementary, to Pine Grove School, or if they would like them to attend Danvers. Obviously, if they live in Danvers with like a parent, whatever, they're hopping on a bus in Danvers. If they want to attend in Rowley, we have to transport them and we split the bill with Danvers.
And
So-
just to go a little further, if I may, so on that page 40, that's where the section where we're listing out the various federal and state grant opportunities that we receive. And so that's I think that you're referencing is the McKinney-Vento homeless grant.
Yes.
I think that grant's about $20,000. That funds a piece of the coordinator's salary who communicates and outreaches with those students, as well as some costs associated with making sure that their needs are met. In terms of the transportation piece, within that 20,000, a very small piece is paid. I think it's about $2,000 for transportation. The remaining piece of transportation, which the last few years has been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, is budgeted out of the general fund operating budget in the transportation section on the district-wide page. And that's where Brian, when I say hundreds of thousands of dollars, that's the total cost. And then we pay 50% of it at that point. So there's some split funding that occurs.
So the McKinney-Vento grant cannot be used for transportation. So like Kyle said,
So
that
it is, okay, yeah, it's just the coordination piece.
the grant, the transportation, we get an offset through the state. Again, this is not a discredit to the need. This is another one of those things that the state has a great concept for that student, that family who has been displaced because of, I don't want to know the circumstances. That is incredibly important that those students can remain, right? They're a fifth grader. They've been at Pine Grove since kindergarten. That's powerful that they can stay at Pine Grove until their family situation settles itself out. Really challenging when the state says, "Oh, and you and the sending district just split the bill." So again, there is reimbursement depending on how the state decides to fund that in the budget each year. But another example of an amazing concept without the financial implications really being thought entirely through by the state.
Yes, okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. I appreciate taking the time.
Certainly. Anytime, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
Peter's still looking for some clarification in the chat, I think.
I see Erica has her hand raised while I'm trying to find Peter's chat question. Linda?
Sure, go ahead, Erica.
Hi, thank you all. One of the things I wanted to ask the committee is how much communication have you had from residents? And also this might be helpful too if other towns have received communications from residents, parents about the budget at this point in time.
I know that I've been asked about the sixth grade classes when they were originally discussed to have them cut. I know at Rowley and Salisbury, it was a tough class, and when they were in fourth grade, as well as when they were in fifth grade, and now they're in sixth grade. So I know that there was some concern for those classes. So I don't know if any other members have heard.
I'll just, it's Susanna here. I would just jump in and say, yes, definitely heard it from high school parents, especially as we're coming into the time of students starting to think about, programs for next year, and their parents being, concerned, as well as themselves about what will be there and what won't be there and what will be available and not be available. And then going back to special ed, I think that is when you start to see special ed teachers being cut, or programs there, that is a big alert, especially with families that have gone through significant amount of testing for their kids, gone through the IEP process, etc. It certainly is it's concerns, and that's coming from the middle school as well as Pine Grove.
I also want to add to both of those. I agree. I've heard similar responses from the community, but we've had a huge outpouring in Newbury asking us not to cut the SEL and the STEM positions from the program. They said we finally got them put in, and now we're looking at removing them with no insight as to when we're ever going to get them put back in there based on what we're looking at with that $966 million cut. So there are parents out there that are very concerned with the green box, which was the option one, with those cuts themselves, let alone cutting anything else.
To quantify that too, because I was just pulling those numbers, at public comment, our last public comment on February 7th, we had 4 parents speak against the cutting the SEL educator and 3 against the STEM. We also received 2 emails against the STEM, 3 against the SEL, and then a follow-up from one of those that had had 75 signatures on a letter in regard to not cutting the SEL teacher.
And if I can add to that, I received a flyer while I was at basketball games from many Newbury, and I would assume other families, but mostly it was the Newbury families that were speaking about the budget and wanting to have SEL and STEM placed back in. Thank you very much. That's really helpful to hear, because I feel like when we talk in terms of scenario 3, we aren't saying the numbers out loud, and that's a little like we're all shying away from the hard conversation. In essence, that number, that scenario 3 is asking them to keep this to a $2 million increase, correct?
Correct.
Which means about high 470s, 500,000 off of the tentative budget passed last week. And I understand that's asking a lot. And I understand that that's what the Newbury Board of Selectmen has indicated. But I think that I think we need to say numbers out loud in this, because we're talking about changes. And so I just kind of ask that people start to think about it, that we're asking for, Newbury is asking to have the increase no more than 2 million at the total budget. And I think, I can't speak for the Board of Selectmen, but I know that this is a very difficult budget year for Newbury as well. We're working our best to get the honest numbers and to put together a balanced budget for our town services as well. And I am a firm believer in public education. My son graduated from Triton last year. This is a hard year. And I think we all need to kind of buckle up. And if there is an appetite, if there's parents that are interested in overrides, please have them talk to us and share that. Because if they want to maintain these things, it's really hard to maintain them without some other way of funding.
Erica, you know, the DCC meeting, as I've said, has always been for us to have these discussions. And unfortunately, the letter that we got from Newbury was new to us. Newbury at our DCC meetings never indicated that the number that was being presented was too high. So now that, and we've always given the numbers, now that Newbury and Rowley have come in with scenario 3, now Brian has to come in with numbers as to what that entails. So that's why this meeting was called, because the towns came to us to say that number is too high. But we have to have these discussions along the whole way of the DCC meetings in order for us all to understand each other. And even, I mean, you're the first person from Newbury to say anything. I know.
And I'm
Newbury,
officially not supposed to, I'm not officially our DCC rep. I just can't step away.
right, but I mean, any of your, whoever the towns are sending as their reps has to be the ones who are able to talk about their town's finances. And it just seems that possibly those people that are being represented maybe don't have the numbers that they can share with the school committee and Brian. But I just want to reiterate that this meeting has got to be the meeting that we have these discussions. Because this meeting's not going to mean anything going forward as budgets get tougher and tougher. Jeff, go ahead. I see your hand up.
It's hard for me as the representative, and I have no problem taking the blame to a point when your budget wasn't formulated, when Whittier's budget wasn't formulated, and Tracy didn't have her budget formulated, to be a seer and give you everything you would like. Now, saying that, the reason it's really a tight spot for me, just as a person, I would like our town, as a past educator, to do the best we can for our schools, but also to plan as well as possible on how we implement the ability to pay for them, such as debt exclusions, which seems to be coming from you guys and seem to be coming from Whittier, along with operating budgets every year being $2 million. So the Board of Selectmen, on the other hand, have listened to the school committee, and I agree with them all. But for us, somehow, maybe on a broader base, we should be able to collaborate earlier, all of us, and know a little more. And maybe there's still time to work towards a certain, but when the green box went through, you certainly had our attention. So I don't know a better way to do this than the fact that Raleigh was in position, Newbury was waiting. Newbury doesn't want to cut any more than we need to get by. I think Newbury's going to be, I don't know what Georgetown's, if I have the right towns overrides, we're going to be in that position if we get hit with new roofs and new sewage systems and capital overrides on the other side. And if we get hit with these type of operating budgets, I mean, are we going to have these much of an increase in the operating budgets coming from the Triton Regional School System every year?
So if I can handle this one, I guess, So this was part of our discussion about the alternative assessment is one of the only ways for us to be able to do anything earlier in the process is by having some sort of an alternative assessment. Because you can do all the budget development that you want, but if the numbers coming from the state don't come until the fourth Wednesday in January, you could prep and have 90% of your increase go to one town and you can't do anything about it. And it's all reactionary at that point. And unfortunately, that's the case with using the statutory method of calculating the assessments. So Triton can look at the budget and has, but literally we're at the point of that fourth Wednesday in January, those numbers come out. We're meeting with the DCC very often the very next night. And then one swift budget discussion after that is to give Brian the target and Kyle or new Brian, whoever it's going to be. They have to have a number at that meeting because they go from a single page to having this huge, whatever it is, page document. And they have to have a number to base doing all of that work on and bring back to the next meeting so that we can vote it. So unfortunately, with the statutory method, I mean, that was one of the attractive pieces when people were looking at an alternative assessment is it allowed it to be more predictable and it allowed it to be more earlier in the process. It allowed everything to plan earlier. And I understand all the reasons it failed, but I guess without trying to address that in some way, I don't think there's any way to start this earlier in the process than what we're starting it right now. And I know Brian and Kyle can talk about it, but and I think it goes to Peter's question in the chat too. But there was a lot involved in the way the union contract worked out that because it was a union. I mean, I know Brian's kind of addressed this and I can let him say it again, but union contract negotiations are very difficult right now. We're seeing that in a lot of different communities. You know, there's things going, you know, kind of precedent that's been set there. Our teachers union has been great. There's also issues with economic factors in here as far as the IAs on the hiring end of our scale being below minimum wage and kind of what the entry level wage is. So we were losing our IAs to places like Dunkin' Donuts. And those numbers did come up in this contract and a lot of them are hitting harder this year than they hit last year or they'll hit next year. So do we know what other budget factors are going to come into play? I mean, we were lucky in that we were able to offset things like a large electric utility increase that would have hit this year and buy ourselves some leeway and things like that. Something like that could come down the road, but also the bigger thing is, again, we could have a relatively small increase. And I'm looking back at those times when, you know, one town's walking back and the other two are bearing the brunt of the increase. And no matter what we do, we can't get out of that. We can't budget our way out of that. And sometimes that's what we're handed by the state. So I don't know, I'll hand it over to Brian's because I'm sure there's probably a better answer to Peter's comment in the chat and to your comment about costs down the road, but.
Yeah, so I think you said it well. I mean, to your point, Jeff, about are these increases going to be this large moving forward? There are factors in the budget that are driving the reality that yes, it's going to be larger than it always was. There are certain, you know, the shift to CAGs that Narissa mentioned. We made a change with the CAGs doctorate column that will save money in the future, but it meant a lot of people are shifting. So there's a column movement figure of 235,000 anticipated for next year. That's usually somewhere between 50 and 150. It depends on the year. So there are definitely some lines that were particularly high this year. Our health insurance, 7.82, that's higher than it's been. It was just last year we renegotiated it, ended up with a zero. That's $500,000. So there's definitely things that ebb and flow. But, you know, So to Peter's point, yes, salaries are driving this 100%, right? 85% of our costs are salary and benefits. We are largely, as a human services organization, we are largely people. But the whole concept of the 2.5%, our budget this, the tentative as written is a $2.6 million increase, 5.28% increase. That's yielding a 6.3% net increase to your assessments in the aggregate, a 7.86, almost 8% to Newbury, 6.7 to Rowley, and a 4.9 to Salisbury. So even as a reminder, back to the alternative assessment, and that was mentioned in Newbury's letter, maybe now is the time. I'm very glad to hear that, right? Because that's the one thing we can control. That's the one thing, if we want to talk about rolling averages and take the state out of the business of setting that first step, we can actually can control that and do it way earlier in the process and not have to wait till that third Wednesday in January. But even if we got down to a 2.5% increase in our operating budget, you would still be over 3% in the net increase it to your assessments. So to get to an average 2.5% increase in the assessments, we'd have to cut 1,631,000 out of that tentative operating plan. So it's this law of percentages that we've been fighting, that law, that those calculations for decades. And an alternative assessment is not the silver bullet, right? This does not solve all the problems by any stretch, but it gives us predictability, and it gives us the ability to foreshadow and really give some projections of what assessments might be. Because there's been requests about projecting out. Yes, we can model out 5 years of expenses with salaries and making some assumptions in healthcare costs and operating costs. Absolutely. But we can have like last year, we had a little over $2 million increase in Rowley because of the formula was over $1 million. They were over half of the total increase went to the town of Rowley because of an enrollment swing. So I think the straight answer is yes, definitely our costs are up. We have to remain competitive for educator salaries and for salaries across the board. There's nothing exorbitant that the committee has agreed to. There's still we're still going to lose teachers, as we lose them to Masco, to Linfield, because they pay better. But at the end of the day, yes, costs are going up more now than they ever have before, for sure. And I think that alternative assessment is a way forward to actually gain some control. Again, not the panacea, but it allows us to take some control back and start modeling some of that out. To your point, was it Erica or someone who was Jeff saying, plan this into the future. If we're going to talk about the towns collectively planning, there's many towns that plan an override every 5, 6, 7 years. If the towns were going to do that and say, okay, we want to collectively, use your words, Jeff, right? We want to collectively collect our efforts here and move forward together. Even if we tried that, we can't, because I can't predict for you what the assessments will be. This year, Newbury's increase is not because of enrollment. It's because your minimum local contribution, your required minimum local increased because the town sees you as wealthier in 23 than they did in 22. Last year, it wasn't minimum locals. It was Rowley's increase of 34 students, while the other two towns went backwards slightly. So both of those factors are constantly in motion, and there's no way to predict them unless we have our own assessment we agree to and take the state out of it.
And Brian, I would like to say that on top of that, one of the most important things is predictability to a point, and I don't mean the alternate assessment, but just the fact that we, especially in Newbury, we've passed one override for education, and we're not going to be that town. Unless I really underpredict my population, we're going to have to probably step forward absolutely in the future, especially with all the needs on the capital side. But we're not going to be that town that does an override for, $500,000 every year, or, it's not going to be, Newbury won't do it.
Yeah.
So we need to, what I meant by, I think in the next next year or three, probably year, we're gonna have to figure out how to pay for education because we no longer can do it.
With all respect, Newbury's taxes as a percentage of income have gone down over the last 5 years.
Say
They've
that
gone
again.
down. Newbury's taxes as a percentage of income have gone down over the last 5 years.
Assessments have gone up.
Assessments have gone up, but as a percentage of their income, people are paying less. They're paying less of what they make to taxes. We can ask for this. We can sell this.
You know what? You are dead on. If it doesn't come as a little bit of a surprise, and if we can assimilate the information, yes, because it's a needed need. But it's just, and throw in what everyone seems to forget is Whittier is an outlier, and the costs that we're going to have the committee formed. If you're really going to be off the books for 10 years, what are you going to need to repair? What are our capital costs coming forward? So towns can bear what they can bear, but like you said, so with the right kind of knowledge and every way we can to look forward to with our finance committee and the select board and the town administrator, we'll have to do what we have to do.
Ronald, do you have a question?
No, I have a statement, Miss Linda.
Okay.
And I wrote this down just because I wanted to make sure I organized my thoughts and that this Zoom is recorded, so it is a public record. So first off, I don't think enough residents really have any idea about what these cuts mean yet, because as you said, in the last DCC meeting, we didn't have that discussion because we were under the understanding that we were going with option 1. So having heard that, that it may be option 3, I think that brings a new tone. And I think that we will start to hear a lot from our residents. And having said that, this is what I wrote down. It is not lost on me that this is the first year in a very long time, like over 15 years, that Salisbury has the least increase in the Triton budget. And we are suddenly in a situation where the other 2 towns want major cuts. In 2018, the town of Salisbury had to have an override vote just to support the Triton budget, and we still support it. Every year, we have had the highest increase, with the exception of last year, we were 2nd, and then this year we're 3rd. For many years, for history, for many years, we tried to examine the alternative assessment. Just to remind everybody, Newbury's chair at that time wouldn't even come to the table or a meeting. Instead, he publicly told people during a Newbury Select Board meeting that Salisbury just wants Newbury to pay for their students, which if he came to the meeting at all, he would understand that that was far from the truth. Years later, when we did finally meet, and through the work of Kyle and Erica, we were able to see that a change in the regional agreement, the alternative assessment, would have been very difficult because at that time, it was again Salisbury that would have benefited. And I knew that there was no way a town meeting in any of the other 2 towns would change that alternative assessment. As elected officials, we will hear about these cuts and how it affects the children of our town. If these cuts begin to affect our children, most Salisbury families cannot afford to just pull their children out of public schools to go to private ones. Unlike the wealthier towns like Raleigh and Newbury, our kids are more likely to start in public school and graduate in public school. Their grades, extracurricular activities, and AP classes help them get scholarships that help them pay for college tuition. That is why we have always supported our school, and that is why we are so concerned with these cuts that are being proposed by the other 2 towns of the option 3. That's it, Miss Linda.
Thank you, Ronald. Is there anybody else that would? Go ahead, Mike.
And I will back 100% what Ronnie just said. It's very frustrating as a Salisbury resident, a Triton graduate, to hear what I'm hearing. For 15 years, Salisbury has stepped up. And for 15 years, I have heard people from Newbury and Raleigh under their notion that they're paying for Salisbury. Well, the truth's going to come out on this one, like I said at the beginning of the meeting. It will come out, and all the parents in Newbury and Raleigh will hear the truth of what Newbury and Raleigh is deciding to do. It, not the school board, the elected officials in Newbury and Raleigh. Everyone's going to hear it. That's all I have to say.
Is there any other school committee member or town official that would like to say anything else?
Linda, do you mind if I do? I know you're not seeing all hands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I can't.
At the just a minute screen. I didn't see anybody. Go ahead.
I can't speak for the whole committee. I can only speak for myself. So I just want to say, even as things get contentious, I'm glad that we're here talking, because when I started on the committee, there was so much rigid thought that no one was willing to even have these conversations. And as hard as they may be, it's valuable and it's necessary. And I'm really glad that everyone is putting in the time and the effort and the thought process, Ronnie's coming with a written statement. You know, I mean, whether it's written, whether it's off the cuff, I just think this is so important. So I appreciate all of your time, because I think we've come so far in having these discussions since I started in 2015. I'd say probably even since 2018, 2019, it's come a long way. You know, we're 9 members of a committee. We're going to have discussions. I think our job at this point is to try and weigh all of the factors. For me, I personally have a lot of factors in this. I don't want to do damage to students, and I think that's the biggest part of it. And the damage to students comes in so many different ways when we talk about situations like this, because it can be services in a classroom, it can be the building that our students are in, and being able to do upkeep on that over the long term, while we're hopefully waiting for some help from the state, not knowing exactly what the timeline on that could be. It's the after hours. Are those students getting, you know, public safety and access to libraries in their towns, and recreation that keeps them off the streets. I'll put that in quotes because I'm not sure they're on the streets, but it keeps them busy and occupied, and you know, moving in a positive direction rather than going sideways or backwards. And I think, you know, the committee will move forward as 9 separate people, and we may not have votes that are even close to unanimous moving down the road. And I think that's a good thing for the committee too, because we all have different priorities. And you've heard some of those priorities here tonight. I would hope too, though, that as we're having those conversations and what's on that list becomes real, that the towns are weighing that. And if there are things on that list that are absolutely unconscionable, and you're weighing those against other cuts that may potentially have to happen in the town, you're in fact weighing those, and we're continuing to have conversations, because I think it's very hard. It's very easy to say, this is the number I want you to come to. And it's very hard when you're looking at that list of cuts to say, these are the cuts that I want you to come to, right? And that's where we're going to end up at the end. Is it's going to be a number, but more importantly, it's going to be those cuts. And I hope we continue to have those conversations and weigh those, because as select board members that are coming to these meetings, and finance committee members that are coming to these meetings, the constituents are the families. Your constituents are essentially the kids, the same kids that we're serving in our schools. Your constituents are, in many cases, our staff members, because they live in our towns. Your constituents are, you know, people who are eventually going to have kids in the schools. And I think it's when I sit on school committee, one of the things I'm always looking at is how is what we're going to do today impact things down the road. And sometimes we're not cutting specific things because we know the impact would be so great down the road, right? That it's going to cost the town significantly more. Or we can make a small investment and have big savings down the road, because we're avoiding repercussions that would be devastating on a future budget. And I think that has to come into these conversations too, because because it's not just about what's happening today and what's happening tomorrow. It's what we're trying to avoid or trying to promote 5 years and 10 years from now. That could potentially be far more devastating than what's happening today.
Thank you, Narissa. I want to thank everybody that came here tonight. As I've said before, these are where we have to have these hard discussions. And it's good to see everybody talking about what it means for our students. The students
Can you
are,
hear me, Linda?
uh,
That was
yes,
Larry.
yes, I can hear you, Larry.
Just two quick comments. One is that this is the first time that I think we all have seen the full budget. I mean, we've seen the green boxes and the 3 boxes, but this is the first time that I've had to discuss the detailed budget, and that's a step forward. The second thing is that much as we hate to, we have to think outside the box. We have to look at what is best for the 3 communities, not, it's Riley's turn in the box or Riley gets escaped, whatever. We have to look at it as a group, and we have to sell, difficult as it might be, that if Riley takes a stand on a certain revision to the Tri-Town budget process, that our assessment might go up. Yeah, but in other years, it might go down. We have to work together as a team, not as individual towns.
I think part of that, Larry, is the alternative assessment needs to really be looked at in order.
Yes, I agree, but we, the individual towns, have to sell that to the towns. It may not be easy. If it were easy, we would have done it years ago.
Agreed.
Larry, next time we're together, we should probably show you where to find all these documents, because I'm pretty sure that the budget's been up for about a month now.
So the budget, no, you just approved it last week. So the first time
Sorry,
the full budget package
with the full
is-
pack, with the high watermark, but we had the proposals out there and we had the numbers out there and what it would look like. But we've had the information available for people to take a look at if we made X cuts, what it was going to be.
Yeah, and I just want to say too, right? So aside from things we'll label cuts, right, is things continue to change. And so as we go from Tuesday was the vote on the tentative budget, which is the first time historically we've put this full, however many page, 50-page document together. Things change. Today we learned that we're going to save $20,872, something like that, on dental insurance, because we had assumed a 7.82% on all our Blue Cross plans, including dental. We got a 2.6% on our medical. That saves a little under 21,000. We're doing kindergarten enrollment as we speak. I should say kindergarten registration and enrollment. Those numbers, it looks like we might be able to trim a section at one of the elementaries. Not creating big class sizes just because of a smaller enrollment. So things like that could save a quick $100,000 with a teacher and an IA. So those things will continue to change. I hope to have a little more clarity around kindergarten by next Wednesday when we meet, just to make sure that it's clear that those things are all on the table, and those will continue to fluctuate throughout the budgeting, this process between tentative and final, as they always do.
Michael, you have a question?
Yeah, I just would like to, I would like to work with you too, Larry. I mean, after 15 years, Raleigh decided to come to the table once they had to start paying their fair share. I would like to work with you too.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions or concerns? I'm going to ask the boards of select that if I could come to your board meetings, if it could be scheduled in. So if the chairs of those boards could email me when your next meetings are so that we can come and make a presentation as to what those cuts are.
So, Linda, the selectmen in Salisbury meet next Monday. So would you be ready then? No.
No.
I was just gonna say, no, I don't think so. I think, so the plan, to reiterate, I think what Brian said earlier, in my understanding from what we had talked about, is Thursday, Brian would receive a number from the school committee on what they wanted, what the committee wants Brian to aim cuts toward, and then he would bring a proposal to meet that number on the 28th. So it would have to be after the 28th. I think as soon as possible after the 28th.
Linda, it's Chris. I will bring your request to our select chair, Cliff Pierce, and I'll also let our town administrator know that you're requesting to come to a future Board of Selectmen meeting to discuss the cuts.
Thank you, Chris.
I also just wanted to comment on something that Narissa had spoke about, and I agree. A Triton Students' Day does not end at 2:13 or 3 o'clock in any of the communities. They do rely on public safety, the town libraries and so forth. So my concern is that I would hope that we don't have to make cuts to any of those services in our towns, but fearfully, I think that there are going to have to be cuts made, and that's not something that I really would like to do because, again, our students, they rely on the services in the town after their school day ends. So that was just I agreed with what Narissa was saying.
If I could just clarify what I was saying too, I think it's important to weigh all of those because I heard, I don't want to pick on Sherry, but she was very vocal about there will be no cuts to public safety. I think it all has to be considered, the value of it, right? It can't be, I mean, just, I guess my hope is that you're looking at a list of cuts from the school, from the district that are affecting all the schools that the students go to, and then looking at those in context of anything else that's being managed through the budget.
And Linda, you would be welcome also at our school, as the school, to come to our select board.
Thank you. So I will touch base with all three towns and find out what is best for getting those presentations done. I want to thank you all for this open, honest conversation. As I've always said, everybody around this screen, it takes a village to do what we do. We're all passionate about our towns and our schools. And I appreciate that. So the school committee will have a meeting on Thursday at 6 o'clock. And then the next DCC meeting after that is March 28th. Going forward, maybe we need to schedule more DCC meetings around the budget in future years. We can have that discussion at a DCC meeting so that we have more open and honest meetings around the budget as it's closer to the budget. I want to thank you all for being here and have a good night.
Thank you. You as well, Linda.
Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you, Linda O'Brien. Salisbury completely supports you all.
Thanks, Michael.